That would be chaos. They might devalue. What would happen when they devalue? What would happen to Portugal? What would happen to Italy? What would happen to the competition in southern part of Europe? Okay, we can leave Greece out of Europe completely. What would happen then? China would come in with investment. Russia would come in with investment. This is also a democracy problem. It's a democracy or a security problem. Security and democracy is coming back to the fore in European politics right now, just at our eyes.
Yes, I just want to say this, that many voting for the Greece staying in the Eurozone, I mean, the Greeks themselves, they actually also want to stay in the Eurozone. I think it's 70 or 75% that are saying we want to stay in the Eurozone. But the problem is, they're not acting like that.
In what sense?
Yeah, because they're electing people that are running a politics that will most likely lead them to the Eurozone.
Graham. That's right, I forgive me. But
yeah, I mean, you know, the usual conclusion is Greece leaving the Eurozone will be a disaster for Greece, but not necessarily. I mean, there are examples where countries can leave. It's a fraught path, we know, and many things can go wrong. But also some things can go right. And one of the problems that Greece has is not competitive. One of the ways to get that is by a quick devaluation. Of course, that is associated with lots of risks.
You can't get it that way. Greece leaving the Eurozone is de facto total collapse of the Greek economy.
It's a de facto collapse on the short run, right? So the question is, you know, what happens when we look a little bit further out? What happens then? What you saw in what we
normally end up with is potential insurrection, to collapse of democracy, return of the generals.
What we normally compare with, that's Argentina, right? That's our normal comparison. That's Argentina, right? 2001. What happened? More or less riots in the streets. There were fightings and so on. And the issue is that's probably also going to happen in Greece, and probably even to a worse extent, because the situation in Greece, I believe, is worse because they don't have their own currency. But in Argentina, it actually helped on the long run, right? Very fast. The issue is here. Whether it's going to play out in the same way here is much more unclear, because they don't have their own currency. They have to reintroduce a drachma or whatever we're going to call it.
Well, we'll come to Argentina later, maybe. I mean, we can argue about whether Kushner expropriated companies is considered to be a bona fide legitimate economic policy.
No, I mean, I was just going to say that maybe talk of Armageddon is pushing it a bit, but on the other hand, it's not going to work the way the economics textbooks say it should work. We're not all just going to get a cheap new drachma and therefore have wonderfully cheap holidays on the Greek islands and get ouzo cut price in Vertex. What is going to happen in practice is, A, we've got to think about the mechanics of changing to a new currency. A new currency that will be much, much weaker than the currency you've got at the moment. I mean, we've had plenty of examples of people changing to currencies that are roughly equal in value and status, or stronger in value and status. But here we would have changed to a weaker currency. Now that has serious political implications, not just for Greece, but then of course we've got all the contagion effects that we're thinking about for other countries, particularly those on the Iberian Peninsula.
So I take on the role as alarmist, because I do agree, almost fully. But what would happen if the economy breaks down, or, I mean, the problems are there. If they devalue, they're going to have huge problems. We see the political system is polarizing. I'll just mention, why did Greece come into EU? It was to take them from a military system to a military rule to a democracy. And in recent history, not in ancient Greek history, in recent history, there was a civic war in Greece.
Right.
There are very big forces.
So, I want to bring us back to the election now. Because we've just had an election, we're on to the third mandate to see if PAHOK can form a government, which they will not be able to do. Highly likely there'll be elections in June. Eddie, can you understand why the Greek people have voted as they have, and as they now go to the next round, and I understand that it may or may not be another election, but let's assume there is for the purposes of this question, they really will be voting on whether or not it's Greece in the Union or in the Euro or not.
I mean, you could make a case for saying this time around they've actually been rational voters. By voting in the way they did, they are pushing the EU to see if there is wiggle room in the rules. Now, actually, the way it's panned out over the last few days, maybe Berlin aside, I'm not sure, it appears that it's some wiggle room in the rules. So maybe the Greeks, in terms of their own self-interest, have got it right.
Let's talk about, yes, please.
I think it's right. I mean, there's a couple of important speeches that have been made in recent days. I mean, look at Christine Lagarde in Switzerland this week was changing the focus from fiscal targets to fiscal processes. Here we see the beginnings.
Oh, isn't it wonderful when Christine rewrites history, along with Barroso rewriting history this week? The only people who are not rewriting history about austerity versus growth are the Germans.
Yeah, well, this is what we've got. There are basically four ways out of this, right? It's basically Germans inflation, which we also hear the Bundesbank now beginning to say maybe they will follow it. We also have the option of going down the other extreme, which is depression increase, and that's where we're at.
It's there already.
So when you talk about collapse of the economic ability of Europe, they already have it. They have a 20% collapse in their GDP. They have 50% youth unemployment. It's already there.
Yeah, I was actually just what I wanted to say about the Germans who monetary policy, right? The Germans have actually now started opening up, changing their incredibly strong views on inflation, right? And saying for the first time, okay, even in Germany, and they talk about Germany, not the Eurozone, but in Germany we will have a little bit more inflation.
We're going to talk about France and Hollande before they move to the United States, China. Because we have to move like. Anybody want to jump in at this point on Greece and what is happening with the Greece, whether or not they should leave the euro, whether or not it is an area that Greece. Wow. You really feel strongly about Greece. Who's been to Greece on holiday? There we are. Let's turn to President Hollande, President-elect Hollande, and what he'd like to see. I want to start with, who'd like to start off with whether or not the French election made any difference. Michael, you look like you're itching to get in on that one.
But the French election is making a difference because it has set a new tone in Europe. I mean, what have we learned during the last months? That was two things actually. That is, the axis between Germany and France is the one that matters. The second thing we learned very clearly, all our economies are interconnected. So of course, when France as the fifth biggest economy